The boss calls his secretary and says, "Get ready for the weekend. We're going on a business trip." The secretary calls the husband and says, "Me and my boss are going on a business trip for 2 days, so take care of yourself." The husband calls his girlfriend and says, "My wife is going on a business trip. Come home, we can have fun." The girlfriend calls the boy to whom she gives tuition. "No tuition this weekend." The boy calls his father. "Dad, at last we can spend this weekend together." Dad, the boss, calls his secretary and says, "The business trip is cancelled. I'm going to spend a weekend with my son." The secretary calls the husband. "I won't be going." The husband calls his girlfriend. "I am sorry, my wife is not going." The girlfriend calls the boy. "You have tuition." Boy calls his father and says, "Sorry, Dad, I've got classes." The dad calls his secretary. Two women waited for St. Peter at the gates of heaven. The first woman asked the second how she ended up there. The second woman said, "It was very dark and cold, and I was shivering and it was unbearable. I was so cold I slowly faded from consciousness and died. What about you?" The first woman said, "I was convinced my husband was cheating on me, so I went home early from work to catch him in the act. I burst into the house, but he was watching TV. I wasn't convinced, so I tore through the house like a madwoman, looking in every room and closet and under each bed. I got so worked up I had a massive heart attack and died, so here I am." The second woman responded, "Well, I sure as wish you would have looked in the freezer. Then we would both still be alive." A little boy asks his dad, "Where does poo come from?" His father is taken aback by the question, but decides to give his son the facts straight up. "Well, son," he says, "food passes down the esophagus by peristalsis. It enters the stomach, where digestive enzymes induce a probiotic reaction in the alimentary canal. This contracts the protein before waste enters the colon. Water is absorbed, whereupon it enters the rectum, finally to emerge as poo." "Wow," says the boy. "So where does Tigger come from?" Janet was lying in bed one night. Art was falling asleep, but Janet was in a romantic mood and wanted to talk. She said, "You used to hold my hand when we were courting." Wearily, he reached across, held her hand for a second, doogie, and tried to get back to sleep. A few moments later, she said, "Then you used to kiss me." Mildly irritated, he reached across, gave her a peck on the cheek, and settled down to sleep. 30 seconds later, she said, "Then you used to bite my neck." Angrily, Art threw back the bedclothes and got out of bed. "Where are you going?" Janet asked. "To get my teeth." The bar was closing for the night, and the patrons were slowly leaving. Just up the street was a state trooper watching them as they left the bar. Out the door stumbled one man. He approached a car. He tried the key, then tripped over to another car. He opened the door and climbed into the back seat. After a moment, he opened the door and stumbled into the driver's seat. He turned on the lights. He turned off the lights. He turned the lights back on. He played with the keys, finally starting the car. The trooper watched him closely. The parking lot was nearly empty by the time he finally got his car rolling down the street. He started weaving and slowly driving toward town. The trooper pulled him over and started his sobriety tests. He passed. The breathalyzer recorded 0 alcohol. "What is going on here?" he asked the driver. "You appeared so drunk when you left the bar." "Oh," said the man, "I am tonight's designated decoy." An elderly couple returns to a Mercedes dealership where the salesman has just sold the car they were interested in to a beautiful, leggy, busty blonde. "I thought you said you would hold that car till we raised the $75,000 asking price," said the man. "Yet I just heard you close the deal for $65,000 to that lovely young lady there. You insisted there could be no discount on this model." "Well, what can I tell you? She had the ready cash and just look at her. How could I resist?" replied the grinning salesman. Just then the young woman approached the aged couple and gave them the keys. "There you go," she said. "I told you I would get the jerk to reduce it. See you later, Grandpa. Never mess with the elderly." The rain was pouring down, and there, standing in front of a big puddle outside the pub, was an old Irishman, drenched, holding a stick with a piece of string dangling in the water. A passer-by stopped and asked, "What are you doing?" "Fishing," replied the old man. Feeling sorry for the old man, the gent says, "Come in out of the rain and have a drink with me." In the warmth of the pub, as they sip their whiskies, the gentleman cannot resist asking, "So how many have you caught today?" "You're the 8th, says the old man. Johnny was feeling depressed, so he goes for a walk on the beach in Traymore. He finds an old bottle on the shore, and when he picks it up, a spirit comes out and says, "You look tense. Would you like a good back rub?" "Well, actually, I'm depressed because I'm so broke. I wish you would give me €1,000,000 instead." "I can't do that, but I can give you a back rub." "Aren't genies supposed to grant wishes?" "I'm not a genie. Does that look like an oil lamp? And you call what you did rubbing it? I'll show you what a real rub is." "If you're not a genie, what are you? Haven't you ever heard of a massage in a bottle?" An old country doctor in Ireland wanted to take a day off work and go fishing. So he approached his assistant and said, "Murphy, I am going fishing tomorrow, and I want you to take care of my clinic. We don't have any appointments, so it will just be walk-in patients." "Yes, sir," answers Murphy. Well, the doctor goes fishing, returns the following day, and asks his assistant, "So, Murphy, how was your day?" And Paddy told him that he took care of 3 patients. "The first one had a headache, so he did. I gave him paracetamol." "Bravo, Murphy lad. And the second one?" asked the doctor. "The second one had indigestion, and I gave him Gaviscon. So I did, sir," says Murphy. "Bravo, bravo. You're good at this." "What about the third one?" asks the doctor. "Sir, I was sitting here, and suddenly the door flies open, and a gorgeous woman bursts in, so she does. Like a bolt out of the blue, she tears off her clothes, taking off everything, including her bra and her knickers. And then she lies down on the table and shouts, 'Help me for the love of St. Patrick. For 5 years I have not seen any man.' Thundering Lord Jesus. 'Murphy, what did you do?' asked the doctor. Murphy replied, 'I put drops in her eyes.'" One day, a blonde woman was quizzing her young son on his multiplication tables. She asked him, "Sweetie, what's 9 multiplied by 8? The little boy looked up with a bright smile and said, "74. The blonde woman beamed with pride, giving her son a big hug and handing him a chocolate bar. A bystander, who had overheard their conversation, couldn't help but ask, "Excuse me, but 9 multiplied by 8 is actually 72. Why did you reward him for getting it wrong?" The blonde woman chuckled and replied, "Well, he's actually improving. The last time I asked him the same question, he said 88. Ben wakes up one morning with a smile on his face, because today he is 70 years old. He gets out of bed, looks down at his toes and says, "Hello, toes, how are you today? Did you know that you're now 70? Oh, the times we used to have together. Do you remember when we used to take a walk in the park every Sunday afternoon? Or the weekends we rock and rolled on the dance floor with all the young ladies? So, happy birthday, toes." Ben then looks down at his knees and says, "Hello, knees, how are you today? Did you know that you're now 70? Oh, the times we used to have together. Do you remember when we always used to march in all the parades we could find? Or all the dancing we used to do with all the beautiful ladies? So, happy birthday, knees." Ben then looks down at his crotch and says, "Hello, Willie, you little traitor. If you were alive today, you'd be 70 years old." Ben wakes up one morning with a smile on his face, because today he is 70 years old. He gets out of bed, looks down at his toes and says, "Hello, toes, how are you today? Did you know that you're now 70? Oh, the times we used to have together. Do you remember when we used to take a walk in the park every Sunday afternoon? Or the weekends we rock and rolled on the dance floor with all the young ladies? So, happy birthday, toes." Ben then looks down at his knees and says, "Hello, knees, how are you today? Did you know that you're now 70? Oh, the times we used to have together. Do you remember when we always used to march in all the parades we could find? Or all the dancing we used to do with all the beautiful ladies? So, happy birthday, knees." Ben then looks down at his crotch and says, "Hello, Willie, you little traitor. If you were alive today, you'd be 70 years old." A blonde was flying in a 2-seater airplane with just the pilot. He has a heart attack and dies. She frantically calls a mayday. "Help me! My pilot had a heart attack and is dead. And I don't know how to fly. Help me!" She heard a voice over the radio saying, "This is the tower. I have received your message and I will talk you through it. I've had a lot of experience with this kind of problem. Now just relax. Everything will be fine. Now give me your height and position." She says, "I'm 5 feet 2 inches, and I'm in the front seat." After a pause, the voice from the tower said, "Repeat after me. Our Father, who art in heaven." A nun, badly needing to use the restroom, walked into a local Hooters. The place was hopping with music and loud conversation, and every once in a while, the lights would turn off. Each time the lights would go out, the place would erupt into cheers. However, when the revelers saw the nun, the room went dead silent. She walked up to the bartender and asked, "May I please use the restroom?" The bartender replied, "Okay, but I should warn you that there is a statue of a man in there wearing only a fig leaf." "Well, in that case, I'll just look the other way," said the nun. So the bartender showed the nun to the back of the restaurant. After a few minutes, she came back out, and the whole place stopped just long enough to give the nun a loud round of applause. She went to the bartender and said, "Sir, I don't understand. Why did they applaud me just because I went to the restroom?" "Well, now they know you're one of us," said the bartender. "Would you like a drink?" "No, thank you, but I still don't understand," said the puzzled nun. "You see," laughed the bartender, "every time someone lifts the fig leaf on that statue, the lights go out. Now, how about that drink?" Sarah's parents are excited to meet her new boyfriend. This is the first time the 28-year-old has brought a man to meet her parents. Her mother slaved over a hot stove all day, while the father cleaned the house and cut the grass. They both wore their best clothes and waited for Sarah. At 8 p.m. they hear that ring. They open the door, and Sarah is there, standing next to a huge man, full of tattoos, and a face that looks like it has been in every possible fight, with scars aplenty crossing his face. He looks like he beats people for a living. After some hesitant pleasantries, the shocked parents take Sarah to the kitchen. "What the heck, Sarah?" asked her mother. "Why would you date a guy like that? He looks like a thug." "You've got him all wrong," said Sarah, irritated. "He's an incredibly nice and charitable guy." "What makes you say that?" asked her father. "Well, just this month he spent 200 hours serving his community." Two doctors were in a hospital hallway one day complaining about Nurse Nancy. "She's incredibly mixed up," said one doctor. "She does everything absolutely backward. Just last week, I told her to give a patient 2 milligrams of morphine every 10 hours. She gave him 10 milligrams every 2 hours. He near died on us." The second doctor said, "That's nothing. Earlier this week, I told her to give a patient an enema every 24 hours. She tries to give him 24 enemas in 1 hour. The guy near exploded." Suddenly, they hear this blood-curdling scream from down the hall. "Oh my God," said the first doctor. "I just realized I told Nurse Nancy to prick Mr. Smith's boil." A precious little girl walks into a pet shop and asks, in the sweetest little lisp between two missing teeth, "Excuse me, mister, do you keep whittle wobbits?" As the shopkeeper's heart melts, he gets down on his knees so that he's on her level and asks, "Do you want a whittle white wobbit or a soft and fewy bewack wobbit? Or maybe one like that cute whittle brown wobbit over there?" She, in turn, blushes, rocks on her heels, puts her hands on her knees, leans forward and says in a tiny, quiet voice, "I don't think my python really gives a thit." Bob, a handsome dude, walked into a sports bar around 9:58 p.m. He sat down next to a blonde at the bar and stared up at the TV. The 10 p.m. news was coming on. The news crew was covering a story of a man on the ledge of a large building preparing to jump. The blonde looked at Bob and said, "Do you think he'll jump?" Bob says, "You know, I bet he'll jump." The blonde replied, "Well, I bet he won't." Bob placed a $20 bill on the bar and said, "You're on." Just as the blonde placed her money on the bar, the guy on the ledge did a swan dive off the building, falling to his death. The blonde was very upset, but willingly handed her $20 to Bob, saying, "Fair's fair. Here's your money." Bob replied, "I can't take your money. I saw this earlier on the 5 p.m. news, and so I knew he would jump. The blonde replied, "I did too, but I didn't think he'd do it again." Bob took the money. Dear grandson, I have become a little older since I saw you last, and a few changes have come into my life since then. Frankly, I have become a frivolous old gal. I am seeing 5 gentlemen every day. As soon as I wake up, willpower helps me get out of bed. Then I go to see John. The Charlie horse comes along. And when he is here, he takes a lot of my time and attention. When he leaves, Arthur Ritties shows up and stays the rest of the day. He doesn't like to stay in one place very long, so he takes me from joint to joint. After such a busy day, I'm really tired and glad to go to bed with Ben Gay. What a life. Oh yes, I'm also flirting with Alzheimer. Love, Grandma P.S. The preacher came to call the other day. He said at my age I should be thinking of the hereafter. I told him, "Oh, I do it all the time." No matter where I am, in the parlor, upstairs, in the kitchen, or down in the basement, I ask myself, now, what am I hereafter? 2 elderly, excited Southern women were sitting together in the front pew of a church listening to a fiery preacher. When this preacher condemned the sin of stealing, these 2 ladies cried out at the tops of their lungs, "Amen, brother!" When the preacher condemned the sin of lust, they yelled again, "Preach it, Reverend!" And when the preacher condemned the sin of lying, they jumped to their feet and screamed, "Right on, brother! Tell it like it is!" Amen. But when the preacher condemned the sin of gossip, the 2 got very quiet. One turned to the other and said, "He's quit preaching, and now he's meddling." A priest and a lawyer walk into a bakery. The lawyer looks around shrewdly, grabs 3 freshly baked buns, and quickly puts them into his pockets. He then tells the priest, "That took great skill to steal those buns. The owner didn't even see me." The priest replied, "That's just simple thievery. I will show you how to do it the honest way and get the same results." The priest then proceeded to call out to the owner of the bakery, "Sir, I want to show you a miracle of the Lord." The owner was intrigued, so he came over to see what the priest was talking about. The priest asked him for a bun, then proceeded to give it to a homeless-looking man outside. The priest asked 2 more times, and after once again handing out the buns, the owner asked him, "Okay, my friend, where's the miracle?" The priest replies, "Look in the lawyer's pockets." Two men were digging a ditch on a very hot day. One said to the other, "Why are we down in this hole, digging a ditch when our boss is standing up there in the shade of a tree?" "I don't know," responded the other. "I'll go ask him." The man climbed out of the hole and went to his boss. "Why are we digging in the hot sun and you're standing in the shade?" "Intelligence," the boss said. "What do you mean, intelligence?" The boss said, "Well, I'll show you. I'll put my hand on this tree and I want you to hit it with your fist as hard as you can." The ditch digger took a mighty swing and tried to hit the boss's hand. The boss removed his hand, and the ditch digger hit the tree. The boss said, "That's intelligence." The ditch digger went back to his hole. His friend asked, "What did he say?" "He said we are down here because of intelligence." "What's intelligence?" said the friend. The ditch digger put his hand in front of his face and said, "Take your shovel and hit my hand." a brunette, a redhead, and a blonde are stranded on the edge of a cliff. An angel appears and instructs them to jump off the cliff while saying out loud what they would like to land on safely. The brunette goes first. She jumps and says, "Pillows." She lands on a pile of pillows at the bottom. The redhead goes next. She jumps and says, "Feathers." She lands on a mass of feathers below. The blonde then walks up to the edge. Just as she was about to jump, she tripped on a rock, sending her over the edge of the cliff, yelling, An air traffic control tower suddenly lost communication with a small twin-engine aircraft. A moment later, the tower landline rang and was answered by one of the employees. The passenger riding with the pilot who lost communications was on a cell phone. He yelled, "Mayday, Mayday!" The pilot had an instant and fatal heart attack. I grabbed his cell phone out of his pocket and he told me. Before we took off, he had the tower on his speed dial memory. I am flying upside down at 18,000 feet and traveling at 180 miles per hour. Mayday, Mayday! The employee in the tower immediately put him on speakerphone. "Calm down, we acknowledge you and will guide you down after a few questions. The first thing is not to panic. Remain calm." He began his series of questions. Tower: How do you know you are traveling at 18,000 feet? Aircraft: I can see that it reads 18,000 feet on the altimeter dial in front of me. Tower: Okay, that's good. Remain calm. How do you know you're traveling at 180 miles per hour? Aircraft: I can see that it reads 180 miles per hour on the airspeed dial in front of me. Tower: Okay, this is great so far, but it's heavily overcast. So how do you know you're flying upside down? Aircraft: My pants is running out of my shirt collar. It's the spring of 1957, and Bobby goes to pick up his date. He's a pretty hip guy with his own car. When he goes to the front door, the girl's father answers and invites him in. Carrie's not ready yet, so why don't you have a seat? He says. That's cool, says Bobby. Carrie's father asks Bobby what they're planning to do. Bobby replies politely that they will probably just go to the soda shop or a movie. Carrie's father responds, Why don't you two go out and screw? I hear all the kids are doing it. Naturally, this comes as quite a surprise to Bobby, so he asks Carrie's dad to repeat it. Yeah, says Carrie's father. Carrie really likes to screw. She'll screw all night if we let her. Well, this just made Bobby's eyes light up, and his plan for the evening was beginning to look pretty good. A few minutes later, Carrie comes downstairs in her little poodle skirt and announces that she's ready to go. Almost breathless with anticipation, Bobby escorts his date out the front door. About 20 minutes later, Carrie rushes back into the house, slams the door behind her, and screams at her father, Darn it, Daddy! It's called the twist! A young couple is on their honeymoon. The husband is sitting in the bathroom on the edge of the bathtub, thinking to himself, Now how can I tell my wife that I've got really smelly feet and that my socks absolutely stink? I've managed to keep it from her while we were dating, but she's bound to find out sooner or later that my feet stink. Now how do I tell her? Meanwhile, the wife is sitting on the bed thinking to herself, Now how do I tell my husband that I've got really bad breath? I've been very lucky to keep it from him while we were courting, but as soon as he's lived with me for a week, he's bound to find out. Now, how do I tell him gently? The husband finally gets up enough courage to tell his wife and walks into the bedroom. He walks over to the bed, climbs over to his wife, puts his arm around her, moves his face very close to hers, and says, "Darling, I've got a confession to make." She says, "So have I, love." To which he replies, "Don't tell me. You've eaten my socks."